Many people hate the RPG games a lot. I mean, a lot. But there's one thing I have to give them credit for. The side content that expands every character. And a huge chunk of that side content comes from side quests, which makes all of these characters feel more fleshed out and multi-dimensional. Some of these quests have actual consequences on the in-game world, while others put us through intense situations that reveal sides of these characters we never knew existed. So I went through every RPG Assassin's Creed game diving into this mess of criticism to see if there was any actual gold beneath it all. And the results were, well, why don't we begin and find out ourselves? And you might be surprised by what these games actually have to offer. Let's begin. If you're an Ezio fan, there's a good chance you will love this quest, and I'm talking about the Flea of Cyrene. This side quest takes place in the city of Cyrene, and it's one of the last side quests most players end up finding in Origins. At first, it looks pretty simple. You meet a kid named Ezio who offers to give you a tour of the city.
Somebody say
Ezio!
And yes, before you ask, that's actually his name. Now, unless that's the biggest coincidence in Assassin's Creed history, I think we all know exactly what Ubisoft was doing there. I was just sitting there thinking, hold on, did they just sneak Ezio into Origins? Anyways, as the quest continues, Ezio asks Bayek to perform Leap of Fates from some of the city's most famous landmarks. It sounds like a random excuse to show off the parkour, but it ends up being much more than that. The more time Bayek spends with Ezio, the more we get to see his softer side. Something the main story surprisingly doesn't explore as much as you'd expect. And because of that, it's hard not to think about Khemu. You start getting a glimpse of what Bayek's life could have looked like if his son was still around. A life where he got to be a father instead of dedicating everything to revenge. There's also the obvious Ezio connection, and in a way, this quest lets the founder of the Hidden One spend time with someone named Ezio. It's a small nod, but the one which longtime fans will catch immediately. What I like the most about this quest is that it reminds us that these assassins had lives outside the Creed, and they weren't always hunting targets or shaping history. And somehow a simple city tour manages to show that better than a lot of quests that try way harder. If there's one quest line in Odyssey that absolutely makes zero sense and is surprisingly hilarious, it's One Really Bad Day. Added as part of Odyssey's post-launch content, this questline starts with a pretty simple mystery. Everywhere you go, people keep complaining about something the Eagle Bearer supposedly did to them. The only problem? Cassandra didn't do any of it. She was innocent. At first, it just seems weird. Then it starts getting even weirder. You find out that this fake eagle bearer also has a pet bird and named Chikaros. He dresses like you, acts like you, and somehow keeps causing chaos wherever he goes. The funniest part is that every time you clean up one of his messes, another one immediately pops up somewhere else. It's basically Cassandra spending the entire questline fixing problems she didn't even create. And honestly, watching her slowly realize how ridiculous this situation is never stops being funny. Eventually, after following the trail of disasters one by one, you finally uncover the mastermind behind it all. And no, it's not Deimos. The mysterious imposter turns out to be a random pirate who somehow managed to recreate the eagle bearer almost perfectly. Same outfit, same sword, and the same bird companion. Well, almost. Because instead of Ikaros, this guy, as I mentioned before, is running around with a chicken named Chikaros, which is honestly one of the dumbest and funniest jokes Ubisoft has ever committed to. And then, because this is Odyssey, the game suddenly gives you three options. Kill him, leave him, or romance him. Like, what the fuck? I genuinely don't know what was going on through the writers' heads when they added that last option, because it made zero sense. Whether you decide to kill the guy or sleep with him, One Really Bad Day ends exactly how it starts. Like a complete fever dream. Continuing the lineup of absolutely ridiculous quests, we have Family Values. And if you've played Odyssey before, chances are that you've already heard of this one. It's probably one of the most famous side quests in the entire game, and it starts when you meet a boy named Supidio. And yes, the name is very intentional because this kid might genuinely be one of the dumbest people in ancient Greece. He's locked himself inside a cage because a prophecy foretold that he'd end up killing his own parents. Makes perfect sense, right? And to prevent that from happening, his parents ask you to retrieve a sword and a shield so that they can defend themselves if the prophecy ever comes true. And that's where things start getting weird. The sword belongs to a blacksmith who's got one goal in life, and only one goal: flirting with Cassandra every 5 seconds.
Gorgeous, Misthios. You take my breath away. Aphrodite on earth.
You can either ignore his advances or romance him. And if you're playing Odyssey, you already know which option the game wants you to pick. We got the sword. But what about the shield? Well, it's a different story. It's owned by a bandit who's significantly less charming and significantly more stabby. So naturally, she dies. And after collecting both items, you return to Supidio's parents and casually explain that you've acquired the sword and the shield by fucking a blacksmith and killing a bandit. Which sounds insane enough on its own, but somehow that's not even the craziest part. Because his parents then decide that this is the perfect moment to reveal that those two people were actually Supidio's real parents all along. And just like that, the prophecy comes true. Supidio indirectly became responsible for both of their deaths.
You killed his mother and fucked his pater.
The realization hits him so hard that he grabs a sword and immediately blinds himself, which is the most bizarre way possible to end a quest. The whole thing goes from comedy to tragedy in the span of about 30 seconds. And this quest was absolutely random and stupid. But somehow it's also one of the most memorable side quests in the entire game. One thing that I will always give Valhalla credit for is that it got rid of the old fetch quest formula. Instead of sending you across the map 15 times to collect random junk, most of its side content is shorter, punchier, and honestly better written. There are quite a few examples I could have picked, but let's talk about the Vinland arc. And yes, I know it's technically part of the main story and I cheated, forgive me, but it's interesting nonetheless. And as the name suggests, this arc takes place in Vinland, which is basically present-day North America. Eivor travels there to hunt down an older member who has a piece of Eden in possession. This piece of Eden was a key to unlock a temple. Eivor eventually kills him, takes the apple, and spends some time living alongside the indigenous people of the region. Up till now, everything is just standard Assassin's Creed stuff. Until you start paying attention to the details. The temple that older member was trying to access was actually the Grand Temple from Assassin's Creed 3. And the apple, it was the exact same one Connor eventually uses. And the indigenous tribe Eivor spends time with, it's the same tribe from AC3 as well. Suddenly what looked like a self-contained story becomes one giant connection to another game, and Ubisoft wasn't even done there. If you spend some time exploring Vinland, you can even hear the British Empire theme from Black Flag playing in the background. At that point, the game practically stops winking at you and starts screaming, like, hey, do you remember these games? But honestly, I loved it. A lot of people overlook just how good Valhalla is at connecting different parts of the franchise together, and considering the game's writer also worked on Black Flag, it makes a lot of sense. So instead of feeling like cheap fan service, these references actually serve the story and make the world feel connected. And that's why the Vinland arc has always stuck with me. Keeping some variety, let's jump back to Origins for a second with a quest called The Bride. You can find it in the Fayum region, and like the name suggests, it follows the story of a bride who has completely lost her will to live after her husband was killed by crocodiles. When Bayek finds her, she's literally standing at the edge, ready to jump. And this is where the quest quietly becomes something special, because instead of forcing her down or giving her some aggressive don't do it speech, Bayek just listens. He actually takes time to hear her pain. Then he shares his own experience and how that kind of pain doesn't just disappear. And after that, he doesn't just walk away. He escorts her down safely and convinces her to leave the region and return to her hometown instead of ending everything there. And this is what makes Bayek such a strong protagonist, because he cares, not just about children or allies, but because random strangers he meets on the road. And in a way, it also reflects how far he's come along since losing him. This quest doesn't try to be dramatic, it just lets Bayek be human. And somehow that makes it one of the most memorable moments in Origins. Mirage continues the tradition of world events, and most of them are easy to miss if you're not actually exploring. One of the more interesting ones is the Leap of Faithful. You find it in one of the later regions, and it also works as a small connection to Valhalla. Here, you meet a kid called the Young Eagle, who's trying to do a leap of faith but he's too scared to actually jump. Basim shows up, and instead of helping him down, he climbs up to him. He doesn't just rescue him or do it for him, he just talks to him and tells him to do it himself. He basically pushes him face to fear and take the jump, and after being motivated by Basim, the kid does it. At first, it feels like a simple side quest with a basic lesson, until you hear his name. His friends call him Haidam, and that's when it clicks. And no, this is not a Haydam Kenway Easter egg, but this isn't just some random kid either. It's the same Haydam who becomes Basim's apprentice in AC Valhalla, and this is where Basim meets him for the first time. So a small world event suddenly turns into actual franchise lore. And this is the kind of thing Mirage should have done more often. The game nails the setting and atmosphere, but it doesn't always connect itself properly to the bigger Assassin's Creed timeline. so when it does something like this, it actually stands out. It also shows a different side of Basim, not the chaotic or intense version from the main story or the Jinni sequences, which honestly became very repetitive, but a more calm, grounded version of it. Almost like a mentor, and that's what makes this moment work. It's simple, but it actually adds something meaningful instead of just being filler. One of the earliest quests in Odyssey that actually makes you think twice is the Plague, and yeah, it shows up pretty early in the game. Cassandra runs into a small village called Kossos where a family is basically the last group of survivors. Everything else is gone and they're stuck in the middle of a plague outbreak. Phoebe, who is with you at the time, immediately tells Cassandra to help them. She knows them, they are friends, and she wants them saved. But then you get to hear the other side of the story from the priest. He says the opposite. That the only way to stop the plague from spreading is to kill the family before it spreads further and things get worse. And that's where the game actually gives you a real choice. You either spare the family and kill the priest, or let the priest go through with it and sacrifice them. Most players on their first run probably chose to spare them, and it feels like the right thing to do. Phoebe is happy the situation is resolved, and you move on thinking you did the good ending. But then the game hits you later. When Cassandra leaves Kefalonia, Barnabas tells her that the island has fallen into a full plague outbreak, and there's no cure or any sort of recovery, and people are literally dying one by one. And suddenly that good choice doesn't feel so good at all. You start realizing your decision might have played a part in it. Kefalonia slowly turning into a disaster makes you rethink everything you did there, and that's what makes this quest stand out, because Odyssey almost never does this.
Malaka, that priest was right.
Most choices don't really carry long-term weight in the world, but the Plague is one of the rare moments where it actually feels like your decision mattered, even if it hurts to think about it later. And honestly, if more quests had consequences like this, Odyssey's story would have hit way harder than it already did. Shadows does this thing where it mixes structured missions with short punchy side content, kind of like a mix between Mirage and Valhalla. And yeah, a lot of the side quests are usually go here, kill X amount of enemies, and bring back the collected loot type of stuff. Out in the outskirts of Kyoto, you meet an old man who's obsessed with supernatural stuff like ghosts and mysterious creatures. He then tells you about yokai stories and believes that they're real and calls himself a yokai hunter. He then sends Naoe on a mission to hunt them down. At first, it feels like you're just clearing out enemies pretending to be monsters, and that's exactly what it turns out to be for most of them. They're not actually yokai, just people using the myth to scare others to gain power. So you deal with them however you want, killing or sparing depending on the situation. Then you go back to the old man expecting the usual wrap-up, except you find him dead. Cherry on top, he's killed by an actual yokai this time, because this time it doesn't look like a human pretending. The twist hits harder because the yokai turns out to be a girl Naoe actually saved earlier in the quest line. You then kill her and the quest ends there, but sadly we got no real explanation about that ever again, because even now it's unclear what she actually was. Was she a real yokai? Was it an animus glitch, or was it reality? The game really did a poor job in explaining such mysteries. They could have at least connected it to the vast Isu lore, but no. And that lack of clarity is both the best and worst part of it. The atmosphere is great, the twist is strong, but the connection to the wider Assassin's Creed lore feels incomplete. So it ends up sitting in that weird space where it's memorable but still unresolved. From this whole list, you probably notice a pattern. The best side quests in Assassin's Creed aren't always the most complex ones, it's usually the writing, the context, or just that one moment that sticks with you. And Last Leaf of Fall is easily one of the best examples of that in Valhalla. You unlock it pretty early when you arrive in England. Eivor finds a young girl sitting under a tree and she is just waiting there. When you ask her what's going on, she explains that before her father left for battle, he told her something very specific. If the tree loses all its leaves and he still hasn't returned, it means he's dead. And now comes the depressing part. There's only one single leaf left, and she refuses to believe anything bad has happened. Eivor quickly understands the entire situation. Her father is most likely gone, and this is where the quest stops acting like a normal side activity. The game doesn't force a solution onto you, it just leaves it in your hands. You can talk to her, try to comfort her, or tell her to move on. But she doesn't, she simply stays resilient. So the game gives you another option, which is kind of brutal, not gonna lie. You shoot the leaf down, and just like that, her hope breaks. She cries, Eivor watches it happen, and there's this awkward silence that sits with you longer than you expect. Because Eivor understands something simple here. The pain is real, but so is the truth. and sometimes facing it is the only way forward. What makes this quest hit harder is what comes later. In London, you can actually find a dead body with a letter referencing the same girl. Her name was May, and that small detail suddenly turns the whole thing into something more permanent than it first looked. And honestly, it's one of those rare Valhalla quests that show just what the game could have been if it leaned even harder into moments like this. Now we finally come to the last quest on this list, and this one is from Origins again. But I think it's the best side quest in the entire series, because it's not just rewarding, it's not just emotional, it actually feels like a main story quest that somehow got tucked into side content. It starts as soon as you reach Siwa, and it revolves around Bayek and Hemu's relationship before everything went south. Before the disasters happened, Bayek and Hemu used to sit together under the stars and look at constellations. And this quest is about Hemu's last wish and Bayek's promise that he would find all the stone circles and earn him a place in the stars. That promise leads you to the 12 stone circles scattered across Egypt. So throughout the entire game, while you're doing everything else, you're also slowly completing something that feels deeply personal to Bayek. And the best part is, it actually changes how you see him. You just don't see him as a hidden one, you see him as a father who's still holding on to something what he lost. Every stone circle adds a little more weight to that bond between him and Hemu. Then, once you collect all 12, the quest doesn't just end. If you go to Giza and reach the Great Sphinx, you can actually go inside, and that's where things shift from emotional to something bigger. It turns out that the stone circles weren't just symbolic, they were a key to an Isu side. If you bring 50 silica and complete it, you unlock the Isu armor. And it's easily one of the best looking armor sets in the entire game. So basically, this quest somehow does everything right. It's emotional, it adds to the lore, it rewards exploration, and it ties back into Bayek's story in a way that actually matters. This is also the kind of side content Assassin's Creed does better than almost any other franchise when it actually tries. And this brings us to the end. I hope you guys agreed with me, and the RPG games are criticized a lot for their grindy nature, but they also offer opportunities to expand these characters which cannot be done normally. But which quest was your favorite? And if you think there's something that I left, then make sure to let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.